Good morning, council members, staff, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, June 16th, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to order and begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We'll begin this morning with announcements, acknowledgements, and recognitions. Do any council members have anything they wish to bring forward? Councillor Smith.
Good morning. I just want to announce that Rachel Reed, the author of Heated Rivalry, is going to be speaking. There's an echo. Rachel Reed, author of Heated Rivalry, will be speaking in Lunenburg on July 11th at the Ice House Theater, and Good Dog Books from Bridgewater will be selling books. There's 100 tickets at $30 each. This is a fundraiser for South Shore Public Libraries, and they will go on sale Saturday morning, 9 a.m. at the Lunenburg Library branch. And it's first come, first serve. You only can buy 2 tickets per person. I really think this is going to sell out. There's been a lot of buzz, so make sure you get there early to line up if you're looking for tickets. It's going to be quite an exciting event. Rachel Reed is a fabulous speaker, and really looking forward to it.
Are there any others? Councillor DeLong.
Good morning. I participated in a Beyond the Band-Aids session in the last few days, and I just want to make note, it was at the Blockhouse Fire Department. It was well attended, and the discussions were wonderful about all the things that are in Council's strategic priorities and vision and whatnot, how to build solutions locally. Thank you.
Okay, that wraps up that portion. So we'll move down to public input. I don't see anybody here in our gallery today for public input, but as a reminder, this is an opportunity for folks to come to council and address council on topics or items that are important to them or they need further clarification on. Up next is the approval of the agenda, and there is no changes to be made. So with that, can I get somebody approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Brooks. All those in favor? Motion is approved. Oh, not motion, sorry. Agenda is approved as circulated. We have one set of minutes of May 19th, 2026. Are there any corrections or errors to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, we'll call those minutes approved. There's no business arising from the minutes today, no presentations, no referral from council, which brings us to staff reports. And up first, we have item 9.1.1 under administration. It's the Community Development Project, and we have Shannon and Quan Ki here today. They are students that have done some work on policy development. We welcome you here to council today, and we look forward to hearing about the work that you've done on this initiative. Welcome to council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just wondering how to get our presentation on the screen. Oh.
Is it ready?
They're just working on it.
It's connected. Yeah, I plug in to the HDMI.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good morning. For those who haven't met us yet, my name is Shannon. This is Quan Ki, and we are working with Alex this summer on some policy analysis projects. We've been doing some research into methods of community development and what other regions are doing in this area. And we have some ideas to share, but also looking for feedback on the types of initiatives council would like us to take a closer look at, and to kind of guide the rest of our summer research in this area. It's quite a broad topic. So this is the agenda for this presentation. We'll start with outlining the purpose and goals of the meeting, some volunteering trends that show the importance of supporting community development at this time in particular, present a draft definition and principles for what community development might look like at Modal, share some background information on what we're currently doing to meet this goal, give a summary of other regions' community development efforts, then present some broad options or directions council may want to go in, and we'll then have some time for questions and discussions.
Yeah, there are several goals with this meeting. First, we wish to clarify Council's goal on community developments. We will review what Modal is doing, has currently been doing, and has planned to do. We will to understand where the Council wants more investigation and analysis, and to review the timeline.
To put things in perspective, this is our proposed timeline for solidifying some of these plans. So once we have more direction, we will work on a request for decision with the recommended approach and service level implications to be presented in September. We'll then hope that community engagement sessions may be organized to understand how the community would want this work to look. And by March, hopefully there will be a final plan, including evaluation goals that could be implemented in April.
Yeah, the session will present the trends of volunteerism in Nova Scotia. Since the pandemic, it is widely known that volunteer rate has declined. Fewer people are volunteering, and people are spending less time on volunteering. And in turn, community groups and nonprofit groups that do a lot of on-the-ground community development work are facing burnout and having concerns about the future of their organizations. And that's the reason we are examining volunteerism and its impact and connection to community developments now. Data from Statistics Canada shows that we are experiencing a decline in volunteerism in both number of volunteers and hours spent on volunteering work. I noticed that we are using province-wide data, so they show the regional trend, but may not be representative for Modal as a rural municipality. Comparing the data between 2018 and 2023, we had a 13% reduction on the volunteering hours and a 9% reduction on the number of volunteers. We have to keep in mind that volunteer hours and rate do not always correlate. For example, the age group of 15 to 35 have more people willing to volunteer, but they contribute less hours per volunteer. And in contrast, the age group of 75 and older have fewer people volunteering, but each of them are willing to volunteer for more hours per person. So we will have to work on identifying ways to close the gaps. And like some of the constraints that led to the gap include logistical constraints and social barriers, and you can learn more about the constraint on slide 57 in the appendix.
To help us frame the conversation and understand how we can support community participation and volunteering, we suggest the following principles, vision, and approach.
To align with the Council's vision of using community development to improve quality of life in the municipality, we will explore what community developments means, how to define and measure community developments, and how can the municipality adopt the philosophy in our planning process.
So we hope that community development will direct how council makes decisions and deliver services, drive us to take bold actions to sustain and invigorate a healthy volunteer sector, and will help us inform how departments and staff collaborate on municipal work and respond to community needs.
The Council has previously identified the 5 strategic priorities from the July 2025 PSC report, and the priorities will guide us on our community development process. And the quality of life, the 5 priorities include improve access and inclusion, strengthen local economy and resiliency, empower residents to shape their community, support overall well-being, and build belongs and social connections.
From discussions with staff and looking at past initiatives, it does seem that both staff and council are interested in an approach that is focused on grassroots, kind of bottom-up community development approaches, harnessing existing community strengths and assets to make this work happen. So I don't want to go too deep into the theories of community development today, but I did want to briefly mention one approach that might be in line with Council's vision, and that is the Fogo Island case study, which comes up quite a bit in the Canadian community development research. In case you don't know, Fogo Island is a community in Newfoundland that was severely affected by the cod moratorium. So about a decade ago, members of the community came together quite organically through kitchen table discussions to discuss the vision for their community and how are we going to bring this place back to somewhere where we want to live and where we can attract others. And what resulted was this place-based approach. You can see the definitions for that acronym there, where that kind of guided the kitchen table discussions. And from this planning, residents identified a desire for a hotel on the island. The Fogo Island Inn was built and is now a thriving social enterprise. So this project did have external support, but I think it's important to just recognize that the community envisioned this whole process. And so that's one case study. But really what I'm getting at here is there are lots of established modes of community development that could support our work later down the line, and frameworks that we could borrow from for any future approaches in MODL. We also want to provide some clarification on what community development is and maybe is not. So in our research, community development is enabling community-led solutions, building local capacity and leadership, strengthening relationships and participation, aligning support around improving quality of life, and supporting resilience and well-being. I think what we want to avoid is the municipality becoming over-involved or directing community projects. And at the same time, we don't want to download some of these core municipal responsibilities onto residents. As Kwan Ki was saying, there's obviously a lot of burnout in the volunteer sector, so trying to balance those two goals. And there are quite a few municipalities with a community development department, but it seems to me to be a department in name, not totally understanding the general strategic direction with that. So I think we want to avoid that approach and just having a title and make sure that what we're doing is really making an impact in the community. So what does community development look like in practice? The New Germany Community Cafe is an example of the sorts of initiatives we might want to see in MODL. For those who aren't familiar, this is a group of 60 to 80 community members meeting once a week. It was a gap recognized in the community where they wanted a weekly community space to get together. So it is hosted by the Anglican Church, but has no formal volunteer structure. Like, there's no sign-up sheets. People are just coming weekly to a space to share with their community, sharing food, friendly conversation. And people are really leaning into the natural skills that they have. For example, they recognized through the cafe that there was a need for some childcare space for parents. So people stepped up that had childcare interest and being with kids. So just they found ways to use their natural skills and assets and make a really exciting, important event happen weekly. So these kinds of initiatives also, while they have value to community spirit and connections within the municipality, there's also another value add for us as in MODL, including these community events and organizations can become an established network and audience for public engagement sessions. For example, municipal staff went to the community cafe to talk about the Salmon Stories Voices of Indian Falls project and had some really great community engagement at that event. So through these initiatives, we hope to support community leaders with the resources to form more self-directed initiatives like the New Germany Cafe.
Yeah, and something that Modo has already been doing in community developments and volunteer supports. Some examples of council involvement in community development include council preferred projects that involve community champions. Council provides free means in grants for community organizations. Council adopts a strategic role in creating and maintaining infrastructure, and the council seeks to provide municipal service through partnership. And here are municipal works involvement. For economic developments, they include support on business development, navigation, and outreach. And there are sector-specific support like agriculture and tourism, and to small businesses. And there are partnerships on regional games like the 55+ games. We have the community-led program like the A2Go program. We have support for community halls, fire halls, and nonprofit groups such as grants and equipment loan. And we have navigation service for nonprofits, such as assisting them in going through the registration process as a nonprofit and assisting them in identifying grants, including Modo grants and grants from external funders. And we have the buy local advantage policies, and we have partnerships like the lake water testing and the hemlock woolly adagio treatment program. In planning process, we also have an extensive engagement process with the community to guide our planning process, so we can incorporate ideas from our residents into the planning service. And we also have the energy navigation service and support to fire hall energy efficiency upgrades. And lastly, we also have community partnership for quasi-municipal service like fire department, tribe groups, park management, community hubs, stewardship, and conservation partnerships, and the remote conference center program. As previously mentioned, Modo has a community hub that is currently in construction, but will open very soon, which is and it's just like next to this building. And it will feature amenities and services that can be used by community organizations, groups, and members. For example, there will be meeting rooms and team rooms, event spaces, creator studios, a commercial kitchen, a flex office, library, programming spaces, and business support and advisory services. And nonprofit may use the spaces and amenity at a discounted rate. And for the support to the volunteer sector, we have a volunteer mailing list where volunteers can learn more about training and education. We have the Designing for Belonging training, volunteers submit, and we provide training opportunities. We also have recognitions and awards for volunteers like nominations, ceremonies, and the volunteer spotlight that are promoted through our channels. We also have support on fire service, include recruitment and group insurance, and we also provide governance advice, including assisting nonprofit to register and advices on running a meeting and doing strategic planning.
So that's what we're doing. Here's a little overview of what other regions are doing, especially neighboring municipalities. And we also looked at some other jurisdictions in Canada. Community development does seem to be coming up more in terms of formal strategies and initiatives, often in terms of planning, economic development, and recreation, but not seeing a total separate stream like this conversation that we're having now. The support seems to be fairly standard and limited to grant programs and some training programs. I'd say MODL is pretty in line with most municipalities in Nova Scotia. although we do have a really robust grant program. In Halifax, they have a neighborhood and volunteer services department that is totally dedicated on increasing social capital and community connections. One great program they have is seed funding for non-incorporated groups through their placemaking program. For example, if a small group of neighbors want to start a community garden or have a mural painted on the pavement, they can apply to the program to receive funding and training and supports from the municipality. But again, it's all community driven and the municipality isn't guiding any part of that program. And they also have youth and senior specific streams and support people. 5 municipalities have dedicated community development coordinators, which is kind of formalizing a lot of the side of the desk work we might be seeing here. So these community development coordinators provide grant writing and prospecting support, tailored training to volunteer organizations. They also do some networking help to connect organizations or people in the province that people might need to get in touch with, and implement youth and newcomer strategies. So overall, MODL does seem to be doing well in the support it offers. Suggestions on how to improve will really depend on Council's desired level of investment in exploring more formalized initiatives.
We are proposing a range of options from expanding current initiative from small to long-term initiative that may involve the creation of new programs. Although we have grouped the options by the time frame, it should be noted that all initiative would require changes to the existing staff workloads. Options that include expanding current initiative include expanding options on grant application process to make it more accessible, and restructuring and modernizing the volunteer awareness campaign, and expanding our current volunteer summit program.
Some things we could do in the short term might be to create a directory of professionals that offer support with grant writing, strategic planning, professional services like that, and potentially create a discounted service program in partnership with those professionals. We could also look at creating a toolkit with existing training modules and materials from leading organizations and make those available to local groups. Supports and programs that may require further planning, budgeting, and relationship building might include engaging the business community on a deeper level to explore potential employee volunteering programs, and adding a business recipient to the current volunteer awards. We could also review how to expand nonprofit supports even further. That may involve expanding access and services at the community hub, free hall or community space rentals, or providing larger items for loans, such as larger tents or speakers, which is something they're doing in neighbor municipalities. With more planning and thinking of long-term impacts, a pilot project could be explored with a specific district or community group. And the pilot could use recognized community development approaches to support local visioning and action planning, potentially similar to the Fogo Island or another Canadian case study. And the goal would be to learn what works and, if successful, and adapt and apply that framework and approach to other communities. A community development coordinator role would put us in line with the 5 other Nova Scotian municipalities that have a designated person working to support community groups. This could increase capacity for relationship building, long-term strategic and growth within local groups, support better communication between the community and MODL, and ensure there's a staff person dedicated to really owning this work and evaluating the progress. So we have a variety of angles we can look at community development from, with a range of levels of involvement from the municipality's perspective. To go back to this timeline, we will be continuing to shape a request for decision this summer. Discussion today will help us shape that research. And then in September, there will be a more formal presentation of options with understanding of the service level implications. And pending council's approval and feedback, some community engagement sessions would take place before a formal plan in March and implementation in April. So yes, we are already doing quite well in community development, but if council would like to deepen that work, there are opportunities to do so. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback that will help us guide the research. And we have some discussion questions as a guide, but feel free to ask any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. That was a lot brought forward in a very good, easy to understand way. And as you mentioned, there's some discussion questions before us, as well as the paper was circulated just to gain some discussion. So feel free to use the questions, but I'm sure opportunity is open for any comments, concerns, or questions that we have. And we're going to start with Councillor Hubley.
I have a couple things, but first, you mentioned a toolkit. What are your thoughts of what you would include in the toolkit to help with the success?
I think in the interest of not creating more staff time and efforts, there's so many good resources that already exist through like nonprofits and charities that are dedicated to this work. I don't have any examples to share specifically, but I guess one example would be the Fogo Island community. So the Shorefast Institute is the charity associated with that work. So they have, guidebooks to using this place-based approach. So there's also a lot of information from Volunteer Nova Scotia or the Volunteer Canada on recruiting volunteers, and just bringing all of those great resources that are dispersed everywhere in the internet into one page maybe on the municipality's site that we can direct people to if they want to seek out that education and training for themselves is what I'm envisioning.
Sometimes I find that it's not difficult to find leaders in your community, but it's difficult to get the community to attend and be interested and be involved. And I don't know, any ideas on that would also be helpful.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you for your presentation today, both of you. One of the things we hear a lot is volunteer burnout. I think one of the things that we might be missing a little bit in our community is volunteer aging out. And the volunteerism is a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, which represents the changing community. So part of what I'm thinking about in my community of Riverport is how does that torch get passed to people who have been holding, for example, really managing and monitoring the community center. How do we welcome in new families? How do we pass that torch to other people? So I think we just have to be careful with thinking that there are tens of thousands of volunteers sitting on the sideline just waiting for the proper invitation. I think that we maybe even need to look at the term volunteerism in a different way so that the next generation feels like they can have some ownership of stuff. So it's a little bit of the terminology. The only thing other thing I'd like to quickly say is the Fogo Island is a good example. If CEDACOB wants to come and drop $150 million in our community, I'm sure it'll have a profound impact. I guess what I would wonder with this is, what position do you feel like the municipality has to support businesses that are here that are not $150 million businesses? Do you feel like that's a part of what this municipality should do as it relates to quality of life? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part there about the business connection?
Do you feel, regarding quality of life as it relates to economic development, do you feel like the municipality has a part with that, to play with that, or I guess I'm curious if you feel like it should be supporting, leading, networking, or maybe doing nothing at all?
Yeah, I think that's something that would be, I think that was in the medium-term initiatives to develop more of a stronger relationship with the business community in terms of thinking outside of just regular business opportunities into how can we get community more involved and gauging capacity and interest of the business community. I don't think I have the answers to that, but I'll definitely do some research, and I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation with business leaders to see if they have, what capacity they have for that and interest.
If I could just add on a little bit there. I'm actually should have done this a little earlier, but I do want to acknowledge that we have a staff working group that's supporting our summer research team. So Trudy, obviously, we have Ruth and Mark also working with us, Abi, Sherry, and of course Sandra, who's been spearheading our project volunteer work. So if you'll remember during the presentation, we covered off a little bit of the sort of navigation and wraparound support that our economic development staff do provide in terms of like BRE visits and those types of things. I think a critical slide in the whole presentation on page 7 of your agenda, or slide 11, talks about the 3 different ways that if we want to adopt a community development philosophy, we need to change or amplify our thinking. So it focuses on council and how you make your decisions. And you're organically already doing this. You organically prefer projects that come with broader community support, that come with some fundraising already done, those types of things. But a community development model would be less so council driving the bus versus council seeing all the different organic transportation options out there and helping to catalyze those. So similarly on economic development, you asked the question, should we be leading, should we be supporting, should we be hands-off? I think the community development model demands that you're not leading because it's not your role. Municipal council doesn't know what the most exciting, most viable economic opportunities are that are out there. But you certainly are a well-connected bunch that know all of the different things that are happening in your community. So you can certainly play a facilitation role, a connecting role, a catalyzing role. And I think that's what the community development model is pushing you towards.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I just have a couple of thoughts. First of all, just around what is already happening. I agree that there is a lot happening at the municipality. I just look at the staff section right now, and I think of all that I have learned from them in the first years on council around community development. And I know when community groups in my area need help, the staff really digs in. And I can see that work in action. What I don't see sometimes is a real clear vision around it and a real clear communication of the services that are available. Often I have to ask before I find out what's available. So from day one, I have often said, you know, I want to be a champion of what's happening in this municipality. And I think one way that we can do it is kind of clarify what's on offer and how people can access that. So I really like the idea of that first tier, starting with that first tier around clarifying and expanding on what we're doing now. Something that I see a lot in my communities is transition in organizations. So to speak to what has already been said around volunteers aging out, I'm also seeing volunteers kind of aging in, joining organizations, and there being this transition between that baton passing. In a lot of organizations in my area, there are young people stepping up, but we need, I find community organizations could use help with the governance piece and support to help through those transitions. So what was said about the toolkit, I love that idea. So I would also kind of pull that out of the short term. And as far as the community development coordinator role, my first thought is that there hasn't been a lot of appetite from the public for us adding new positions. So I would want to think about how we're going to budget for that. But if that community development role is helping us improve what we're doing, and it's improving coordination across districts. I think, you know, there's a lot to be learned from other regions, and if Queens is really taking this up, and other areas are taking this up, it is nice to have someone really concentrated on that role. So those are my initial thoughts. Thanks for the presentation again.
Just
Oh, go ahead.
provided just a touch of follow-up there. The timeline is purposely created not to try and make decisions outside of the budget cycle. So staff are very mindful of the direction that we've received through 2 budgets now, which is a hard no staff increases. I think some of the communication item that you've raised there around the clarity about what's available to community groups comes because of, first of all, the passion of staff members like Trudy and Sandra, who have been doing incredible community development support, but it's not the focus of their role. Sandra's role is largely administrative, and she has taken this on because she's a competent and driven and passionate community member, really. And Trudy has years of experience in doing this sort of thing. She also manages a department. So she has lots of other responsibilities. And so if there is a desire to invest in that, the question then comes back to senior staff. How do we reorganize the resources that we have to better push this strategic priority forward?
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Shannon and Quan Ki, thank you for your presentation. It gives us some things to think about. I want you to maybe ask a question in this research. Is there an appetite for crossing community lines to provide volunteer support? The reason I ask that question, within my constituency, a group who has provided a strawberry supper for 48 years, this year is not having one. Now, when they calculate the number of servers they need, the number of berry pickers, the kitchen help, the dishwashers, even the people who work in the parking lot to help park vehicles, adds up to a lot of volunteers. They came to the conclusion that this year they can't provide a proper supper because they can't get the numbers of people who are willing to give a weekend day in the middle of the summer off. So a lot of people from outside, probably 85% of the people that attend that event come from outside the community, but it's one of a series of suppers that they schedule in their calendar. It's no different than me going to Newcomville or Baker Settlement for suppers that I plan. But it's unfortunate if these type of events start disappearing. So if I wanted to go to Clearland to the chicken barbecue and they don't have enough people to run the organization, would they be open to someone from Dayspring helping in Broad Cove? You know, this is my question I'd like to ask. Sometimes communities are guarded when they have an event, but I think we're coming to a time where the event is important, but the lack of volunteers make it a possibility that we'll lose more of these community events. So I might have been long-winded, but I wanted to try to give examples of my thinking. So thank you.
Councillor Oikel.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the information, and I really think the idea of the toolkit will be very helpful. Just one thing that came to me while Councillor Bell was speaking was, I think that in this age, we should really look at all being connected rather than individual communities. And before, due to lack of transportation and communication, you would have, Waterloo having its own community center, which they don't have anymore, or New Germany, or all the little communities would have their own thing. But now we're so much more than what we were, and that I think that perhaps we need to look at community development as a whole, and everybody connecting and helping each other, rather than the glory going necessarily to one community. I also wanted to mention seniors. We have a lot of seniors in our municipality and within just Lunenburg County altogether. There are 2 senior groups within just the town of Bridgewater that are very, very active. Our own recreation department does activities, about 4, I think, throughout the summer into the fall for seniors. And I think we need to look at them because of their loneliness, but also they were the volunteers and they still want to do something, but they don't want to do everything. They still want to be involved. And I think that there are, I don't really know what at all, but I think that they can be a big source of support and help with information, with skills. And I just wanted to mention those 2 things.
Counselor Moore.
Thank you. As for a community development position, I can get behind that as long as it's not, as long as it's 1 to 2 people or just 1 that can go out in the community and do the hands-on stuff. But I cannot, we've been through this with the RDAs, we've been through this with other organizations that try to, and it gets too big, and you're spending more time on administration and those kind of things than you are actually in the community doing the work. I did get to see in Edmonton a presentation on Fogo Island by Zita Cobb, and it was very impressive because she starts out saying, about AI and if it's going to be a positive thing in the future, and we don't know if it is or not. It could be a little bit, but it could be really bad too. And we've been seeing on social media how bad AI can get. So, but she started out saying, about places and people. That's what you need to get things done. Now, she said she left home very young from a very poor family. Her father told her to go out and find out how to make money. And I think she did. I'm pretty sure. And but what she came back to the community with and what she's done is remarkable. So it was a good presentation. I'm glad I've seen it. Thank you.
Counselor Burns.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit to discussion questions, and for me, I'm going to do the typical counselor thing, which is tell you the outcome and then not give you a lot of help on how I think we should get there. But I am, for me, if we're looking at measure of success here, for me, what I really notice is how people define community is changing a lot based on the age, demographic or bracket that you're in, and increasingly, and maybe I don't know whether it's a correlation or a causation, but also sort of in the industries in which you work and how you interact with the world. And so if we're looking at building community, there's a lot of people who find ways to build their community, but they're not doing it in the local geographic region anymore. And so as a region, and as a municipality here, as we're growing, as new people are coming in, as our age demographics change and we need new people to come in and be a part of that, what we want is to find community initiatives that give people an anchor into the local community so that part of how they're developing community is local here. That may look different than what we're doing now, but for me, the measure of success is, if you look back at this 20 years, are we a bedroom community for a larger area because everyone has found their community online or through different avenues and through their niches? Or are we a community that is attached to larger economic centers, but people still retain some local ownership? That doesn't mean that every event is going to be as localized as just Maitland or just Northfield or just Dayspring, but as a region, are people still connected here through through some form of community, and that's what keeps the place vibrant and not just the bedroom community to a larger economic center. So for me, that is the broader measure of success. Did we do that? Did we maintain some of the community aspects and local traditions here?
Councillor Brooks.
This was just building on what Councillor Bell and Councillor Oikel said, and I think that a regional thinking is a good approach with some of the volunteerism. To Councillor Bell's point, and this is what we talk about a lot, some of this feels like communication and messaging issues. If Councillor Bell hadn't mentioned that dinner, frankly, I'm not sure I would have known about it. So I don't know how many people don't know about what some of the other opportunities are. I don't know if that's a portal we need. I don't know if that's a weekly list. But for people who are keen to explore other parts of the community and want to pitch in and do some help, I don't know if a centralized place would be beneficial for that, but maybe that's something we can explore.
Mayor McLean-Weil.
Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll try to contain them to a few comments. I appreciate the comments that councillors have made, because I feel like we all have a sense that this is probably really something we need to dig into, and that it can have tremendous community value and importance in our long-term development as a bigger community. I think Tom says there's 300 communities within the district of Lunenburg. I had no idea, but I think that that's probably true when you start looking at all the geographic names. But I really appreciate what Councillor Burns said about how our sense of, and I think Councillor Oikel referred to it as well, that our sense of community is changing, and how we identify with where we live and where we feel our sense of community. And that's kind of a high philosophical discussion we could have, but I think overall we need our residents to feel that they are connected here and they have a sense of belonging and inclusion, whether it be in Northfield or Parkdale Maplewood or wherever, or whether they feel they're part of Lunenburg County, you know, however they define that. And I know that some of you heard me tell this story because I find it as a marked difference between where I grew up and where I live now. Because I grew up in Pictou County. I grew up in a little tiny community called Island East River, but outside of Pictou County, you never would say that you're from Island East River. You say you're from Pictou County. Here, you're defined, and Tom's laughing because he understands this. Out here, you're defined by your community where you live. And for 40 years, I have experienced this different sense of community. And it gets to the point, I think, that has been made by several of the councillors. So we have to respect the fact that there is a long tradition here of identity with your particular community. And that may be for those who've lived here a long time, but for newcomers to our community, they may define that a bit differently. And again, it ties to what Councillor Burns is saying. I think there's a number of aspects here that I do want to, one, I would like us, because you're asking for things to dig into more. One is some criteria that council members could use in evaluating projects. And I think we've tried to do this with setting standards for our parks. We've asked for it how we evaluate the decisions about whether we place parks or develop parks. We've asked for that. I think this is a really important lens that we can then evaluate what impact we are having. If you don't set that out, then you can kind of stray off a bigger thinking around that. So that's one thing that I think is important. The other point that several councillors have raised that I think is, and the second point I want to make is you've outlined 4 different steps. I don't see those as being mutually exclusive. And I think it would be important for us to think about that as that they're not mutually exclusive. That yes, we can maybe quite easily assemble the toolkit pieces that could be used like this fall when groups are starting to reassemble and reorganize. But the other steps can also happen. I do think that the community engagement on this is really important. And that is to share what we're thinking about what this could mean, why we think there will be better outcomes, and how it might impact on individual communities, and then hear from them. And I really think that will help us. It really does speak to what community development is about, is that you start from the grassroots and you build it from where the community recognizes that they're needed. And the third point I want to make is around the staffing piece. And I think this will be for staff to come back to us with a plan for how we integrate what we already have, which is we have very strong elements here, but it is to this bigger vision and a bigger strategy. And staff will be in a better place to tell us how that might work. And I know from conversations with our CAO that he's been thinking a lot about this, and that staff have already been considering this. So I look forward to that. I still remain committed to the idea that we should be thinking about how we do this with our current complement of people, as opposed to hiring people. Because I think what's required here are training components, and I think that's something that would be interesting for you to report to us on, is the training requirements around how we really fully utilize community development, vision, strategy, and implementation. What level of training and what kind of training is needed. I mean, I did a lot of work on this as well in even bringing this forward. And in doing that, I saw what you have mentioned, is that community development is used broadly. But when you dig down, it isn't, I don't see what we're talking about and what my bigger thinking is around how we do this and what you've reported about the big thinking. Community development gets and I don't like to use the word siloed, but it gets under planning or economic development, as opposed to this all-encompassing approach that would look at recreation and programming and parks and economic development and our other elements of our work. So I think that those kind of three things are important for us in our development of our thinking and what we want to do as a council. I am encouraged by the comments people have made, because I can see that that people see the value in this, but I think we're in early days and we need to really carefully craft it so that we make it so that it really truly reflects what our community needs, what they see that they need, and what we see is reasonable for us to do. So it's the criteria for us for council. It's about the community engagement piece and how we might do that. And thirdly, the staffing piece and how the training and realignment that may be necessary within our staff component to really carry this forward.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks. I feel like I'm risking something trying to follow that up. I'm not going to try and follow that up. I just wanted to add another point that I missed earlier, which is around climate resilience. And I attended the Climate Atlantic conference a couple weeks ago, and adaptation is huge right now. And many of the big conversations in my community are around drought, fire smart, like how are we getting ready for the next ongoing thing with climate change. And so I just want to point, like kind of a finer point on, if we don't have local community connections and strong communities and strong organizations, we're in much bigger trouble than we already are. And I would just really like that climate lens to also be present in this work, and to make sure that our emergency services, we have community outreach is kind of brought into this thinking around community development, because stronger communities and organizations are better prepared for climate events, which happen on a local scale. You really find out, who's in your community and where you go for help when things happen.
Don't have any other speakers. I did write down some things as councillors were speaking, and I don't have much new to add. But the term that Councillor Brooks had used, rather than burnout, is aging out. And I think that's a really important component to all of this. Outside of my work, outside of my council responsibilities, I'm on 5 different boards. And the struggle that I'm seeing is really how to set up for success in the future and capture the history of those that are aging out, because the history is up here. It's not on here. And how do we help community groups thrive so that when new people step up, they know where to start? Because it's very hard to you get in a repetitive motion when you're on these volunteer boards. You just know what needs to be done, but it's not reflected in anything that you could hand over. It's something I'm trying to change with the groups that I have, but I'm still learning and pulling from people that have since left boards to find out, do you know where we got this? Do you know where this is from? So to reflect that somehow in the community development piece, I think, would be beneficial. And when you have new, young people step up, you don't want to overwhelm them. You're so excited to have new blood in your group. You don't want to overwhelm them, because you get to the point that you're not only passing the stick, you're passing a boomerang and it's coming right back to you. Like, that's what I feel like sometimes. I've tried to pass the stick, but it's more like a boomerang. There's nobody else to accept that. So we have to, set these new volunteers up. And I also find there's a little bit of difficulty with my generation and seniors, because we have everything written down, but they're smart up here. We just got to capture that knowledge and get it written down to help groups going forward. So those are my final comments. Any closing remarks from anyone? No? I think this garnered some really good discussion and got us thinking about how this might proceed going forward. So thank you again both for bringing it to us, and I'm sure we'll see you again here with some further thoughts. Yeah. And I should ask, do you have any follow-up that you wanted to share from our discussion before we?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Next on our agenda, we have 9.2 under Finance, 9.2.1. We have the LaHave Coastal Conservation Association tax exemption application, and we have Elena Wenzel, our Director of Finance, to bring that forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of council. So I'm bringing before you a property tax exemption application from LaHave Coastal Conservation Association as part of your Policy 12, which provides a partial or full tax exemption to qualifying nonprofit organizations demonstrating a service to the community. The tax exemption is awarded at council's discretion as per Section 71 of the Municipal Government Act. LaHave Coastal Conservation Association has made application in the past and was granted full tax exemption in previous years. They are now making an application for 50 newly acquired properties. A major consideration for qualification of your tax exemption is the service the organization provides to the community. So I've attached the application and the list of properties as well as the amount of the tax exemption. The tax exemption request is for $3,224.39. It's not currently budgeted in your approved 26-27 operating budget. There may be budgetary room in the tax exemption section, but we won't know really that until later, perhaps in the fiscal year. Granting the tax exemption for conservation properties does support Council's climate action strategy, which by supporting this nonprofit organization that purchase properties to conserve them for future generations. Providing that tax exemption for LCCA does support that sustainability goal as well by encouraging a long-term land conservation, ecosystem protection, and climate resilience. And it does also help advance the target of conserving 20% of our land by 2030 under our municipality's local climate change action plan. The Finance Department staff can complete the necessary work in the existing work plan. Because the tax exemptions are granted solely by council as per the policy, council may decide not to grant this tax exemption. But based on the information that council has previously approved, tax exemptions for LaHave Coastal Conservation Association and the the ability of it to help climate change and sustainability goals be met, we are recommending that Municipal Council approve the tax exemption as presented.
Is there somebody willing to bring this forward, and then we can have discussion on it following the motion? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. To the Chair, Deputy Mayor Vino, and members of the committee, I move that Policy and Strategy Committee recommends that Municipal Council approve the tax exemption application from the LaHave Coastal Conservation Association as per Policy 12, Tax Exemption Reduction, for a 3-year renewable term in the amount of $3,224.39 as presented. I so move.
Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Reinhardt. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Elena. Just for anybody watching at home, can you tell us how we get to $3,224, how that number is achieved?
Certainly. So the properties that they acquired are all taxable right now, whether they're resource taxable or residential taxable. They will be making application to the Nova Scotia provincial government to have them become exempt, as they are doing with their prior properties. But until they make that application, they remain taxable on the assessment roll. And so for that reason, if council doesn't grant the tax exemption, but they will have to pay the taxes on the properties.
Any further discussion? Councillor Oikel.
Just along that lines with Councillor Brooks, if the province doesn't give them the exemption, this amount will go up because their assessments will go up every year. Is that not correct?
Through to Councillor Oikel, if the amount will change based on whether or not the assessments change and whether or not council changes tax rates in future years. We have many properties on our tax exemption list which we do budget for. So if council made an approval, we would continue to budget for it until it was exempt.
Follow-up. So then would you end up coming back to us for an added amount? Because it would be more than this $3,224.39? I'm just wondering, like, the process, how that works.
Actually, you would see it in a budget line item in your next year's budget. We would do a calculation based on all the approved properties. Because there's not just LCCA in this. I think King's Coastal Conservancy has properties. You have a lot of organizations in that section of the policy, like community halls and those kinds of things. So there's many tax exemptions that council's already approved. So we would do a calculation and say, this is how much you need for your tax exemptions for next fiscal, and it would be part of your main budget document.
Mayor McLean-Weil.
I just wanted to make a comment, because this is, a couple of people have raised this with me about the Conservation Association, the LaHave Coastal, and I did have a conversation recently with Jim Sunderland, who is the champion for this initiative, and I think it certainly does align well with us supporting them through getting this tax exemption and recognizing the work they're doing, because it aligns with our conservation strategy. And most importantly, Mr. Sunderland and his group of volunteers have a greenhouse where they're growing native trees that then they're replanting to restore the forest area in some of these properties where trees have died, and they're trying to replace plant material with native plants. Growing trees from seed is a very long-term, big process, and it takes someone with vision to think that a chestnut that you pick off the ground in the fall will eventually grow into a beautiful tree. But they are trying to foster a greater selection of native plants to go back into the forest areas which have been logged or where they can replace them. So I think it does align really well with what we think is important in our conservation strategy. And I just wanted to add that for the record, as some people, a couple of people have raised it a little bit in a suspicious way about what they were trying to do. And I think it certainly aligns with things that we would be supporting as a municipality.
Seeing no other hands, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Up next, we have under Recreation, Parks, and Tourism, item 9.3.1, funding model for proposed commemorative asset policy. And we have Sandra Chalice with the Recreation, Parks, and Tourism Department to present this item.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, so in front of you, you have a report that's seeking your direction on the funding model for a proposed commemorative asset policy. At present, we don't have a formal policy. Requests have been handled on a case-by-case basis. Staff have developed a draft policy, but before finalising it, we're looking for guidance on how costs should be shared between the donor and the municipality. Historically, commemorative requests were relatively informal and involved lower cost furnishings, and it was usually a wooden bench. We've since moved to standardised, more durable park assets, which come at a significantly higher cost. As a result, it's important to establish a consistent and transparent approach moving forward. The purpose today is not to approve the full policy. It's to determine the preferred approach to cost recovery so that staff can finalise the draft policy accordingly. Once the draft is finalised, it will come back to Council for approval. So the costs, for context, installed with a plaque, a bench is around $3,600 and a picnic table around $6,000. The costs for the asset only are $2,190 for the bench and $2,660 for the picnic table. And an engraved plaque on its own, which I'll talk about later, would be around $100. So the options I'm asking you to comment on, please, are option 1, which is full cost recovery. So the donor would pay the full cost of the item. There'd be no impact to the municipal budget, but it may limit participation due to the costs involved. Option 2 is a recovery cost for the equipment, which is less money. The donor pays for the asset only. The municipality would cover the cost of installation, and this represents a partial subsidy. Option 3 would be a set donation amount, and I put in the report 1,000 or 1,500, but that's up for debate too. But it would be fixed, a fixed, predictable contribution. It would be easier to communicate in the policy, but it would mean a greater level of municipal subsidy. Option 4, now this could be combined with any of the other options or a standalone option, which is the plaque on its own, around $100. It's a lower cost option for donors. There's no new assets, so there'd be no new bench or no new picnic table. And it would be a shared commemoration rather than a dedicated furnishing. So there might be 3 or 4 plaques on one bench. The key points of the policy that we've drafted is that all the commemorative assets are municipal property. Locations and installation are subject to municipal approval. The assets are not permanent, so we put down an expected lifespan of around 10 years. Replacement of the asset is not guaranteed, and commemorative plaques are not installed in perpetuity. And in closing, once Council provides direction on the preferred funding approach, staff will finalise the policy and bring it forward for approval. Without that direction, we could either continue with the current ad hoc approach, which we really don't recommend, or we could stop offering park commemorations entirely. And that's me done. Any questions?
Okay, turned over to the floor. Councillor Oikel, then Councillor Hughley.
Well, I don't want to not do it. I have some elderly friends who have talked to me about donating benches in their will, like to do commemorative things or whatever in their wills. And so they would be very disappointed not to have a place, a picnic spot or a bench in, especially Miller Peace Park, where they go walking and they really like. And I'm just wondering if even doing the plaque is a good idea, but I think we should still consider some way in which to do specifically the benches, because I think they're the most popular, rather than the picnic tables. And between full cost and cost recovery, somewhere's a happy medium in there, somewheres. I'm not really sure.
Councillor Hubley.
I'm leaning toward option 2, the cost recovery. Whatever the resident would want, the bench or the picnic table, whatever they feel that they want to afford. I also like the plaque option, but I don't like the option of multiple plaques on one bench or one picnic table. So I think space would be limited, and I'd be okay with that. Yeah, so option 2, and I'd like to hear what others here think around the table.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I think that by accepting donations, we have a greater chance of getting furniture, benches, tables into our parks. To do it at cost recovery would probably exclude a lot of people who would have the intention of wanting to do something. I have already put people in contact with the Recreation Department who want to donate in one of the parks in our area. They're not likely able to come up with $1,000, but they want to commemorate maybe the loss of a mother or a father or something, and a $250 charge or $300 is something that they could entertain. So I would like to see us be able to put pieces of art, furniture into our parks or other public spaces that would recognize through using a plaque, not multiple plaques. I would not be open to putting a plaque on a bench with 5 others. The bench is there because I wanted to do it or the next person wanted to do it. If you were going to do plaques with multiple entry, then put a plaque at that public place that, I'll give you an example.
Like an in memoriam thing,
Yeah.
where you'd have a piece of a wall or whatever, and then people could put the plaques on it rather than go onto a bench and multiple be on there. Is that what you mean?
If you go to the 40s community hall, there's a wall plaque there that's got like 100 plaques on, and it's either a silver or a gold plaque, whether you gave $1,000 or whether you gave $250. Some don't identify the amount, but there are corporations on that wall that have given $10,000, and so they ask for their company name to be listed. So I do think there is a role here. We've never defined it. This is an excellent first step, and so my thoughts are, yes, we should do it. It should not be based on full recovery, and it should be limited to 1 plaque per appliance. So I'm trying to make it simple, but to reflect my idea. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. While folks are still thinking, I like both ideas. The one that Councillor Bell brought forward about, a mutual place, but also the option for those that might want to have a picnic table. I'm thinking of those that might have a smaller donation. No matter the size, it's the meaning, it's the thought that goes there. And this would give people opportunity to also be able to reflect a loved one's name or their name, or maybe just a donation to the park because they want to see it thrive and grow. So I'm a fan of both. I'm not sure where I said on definitely not the full cost. I guess I'm between the set donation and the equipment cost recovery, but also tying in the lower denominations that we get that are just as important. They all add up. Yeah. Any other direction or comments council wants to provide? Oh, Councillor Burns.
This may be unpopular, but I'm looking at this from we're making a decision as an organization about what assets we're going to put in a park, and then people are also coming forward and saying we would like to add these assets to a park in order to create this memorable thing about a loved one or someone close to them that is also in a park, and I suspect it's probably because they had a connection to that park. What I like about the full cost recovery is that it doesn't mean that everyone is also a part of making that memorable donation. It's not that we're saying we need 10 picnic tables and we're not funding it, so please come forward and pay for them and we'll give you a plaque. It's people coming to us, my understanding, saying we would like to add this to the park. And so conceptually, to me, I know that it might be a little bit more prohibitive for that, but it makes more sense to me that if people are coming and saying, I want to add this to a park, I want to add this to something, that they are also responsible for that cost to do so. I like having options that are more affordable for people. I think that, you know, we're just coming off that community development discussion, and we're talking about how is it that people see themselves in community, and part of that is the history and the people who enjoyed the assets who are here. So if there's an option for people to be able to make a donation and have a loved one recognized in some way, it doesn't always have to be a large scale item. If there's another way to recognize that and have those names remembered that way, I think that is a great option there. I don't know, I'm cautious of putting it 1, 2, 3, or 4 on that, but that's how I conceptualize this, is to say, I want to make it such that folks can make donations or improve parks or do things in memoriam of loved ones who enjoyed those areas and felt a connection to it. But I don't know if it necessarily needs, I don't know if we need to subsidize that, because it's not a fundraising campaign. It's a lack of a better term, a service. It's an option we're providing for people in the sense of that it builds community. So that, I know it's unpopular because it's more expensive for people, but that's really what it comes down to. So how is it we provide the opportunity for people to contribute either through an estate or however it is that they're doing that in a way that is reflects the economics that they can bring forward to it.
Councillor Brooks.
I feel like this might be an opportunity for some public-private partnership, and you know, if we are the ones who are choosing which assets need to go into our park, not would fit into our park, but need to be in our park and belong to our park, there's an opportunity to then communicate that with the public, and perhaps then give them an opportunity to help support that, come in, be part of that donation. If there are 20 people who can only do $50, that's great. We can find a way to pool that money, and then, you know, they would be part of that support. I'm leery about the municipality supporting the individual plaques. I feel like that is a very personal community point of it, and I would have a hard time getting behind supporting that component of it. If it is the park asset, which belongs to the municipality, otherwise, I think I would like to see how that fundraising could happen to facilitate and make that donation work for people, but I'd have a hard time with us funding the plaque.
Mayor McLean-Weil.
Yeah, this can, I realize, I knew as soon as I read it, this is going to get complicated, and doesn't, and it's good discussion, and to Councillor Bell's point, if we didn't have a policy on this, it really is important, because somebody may want to make a big donation, not, you know, somebody might want to write us a big check, and we should be encouraging that we can offer them a tax receipt, and they could invest in our parks. So I don't think we should think it's like $250 or $1,000 or $3,000. It could be $250,000 or $25,000. Anyway, having said that, I agree with Councillor Brooks. I do not favor the $100 plaque, because I think that's $100 just to have your name put on a bench or a picnic table without having really truly invested in it, is because everybody thinks, I mean, I would just think if I saw a plaque on a bench that they paid for the bench. So I think it's a bit misleading. So I don't really agree with that. I wonder about because I realize we've got people in our community that, could write the $250,000 check, but we've got people who might want to write a $25 check or a $250 check. And I wonder if we couldn't create just a fund that you can make donations and that we draw from that at specific times to furnish additional pieces in our park. And with the recognition that we will notify families, we'll let them know what the plan is. I don't know if that's another option, but it does give flexibility then to use some of that money to help offset some of the costs of when we are furnishing parks to recognize the family, and then do it on a plaque that to Councillor Bell's point, that you could say these pieces of equipment were funded by or assisted by, we put these in place with assistance from these residents. I don't know, but I feel like allocating a certain amount of money for a bench and putting that out there is, I think it does discourage people a little bit, and maybe we just need to also notify people that they can make donations to our parks, that we can write a tax receipt if people want to do that. I think that the public fund approach might be another way of thinking about it. I'm not suggesting that's what we should do, but it is another way of thinking about how we might create some funds to invest in the assets in the park.
So could we suggest a minimum donation with no ceiling? But where is that level? That's the kind of thing we're looking for guidance for. Miller Point, for example, nearly every bench, there aren't that many spaces in Miller Point for new benches. And it'll only be, so we may have 3 families waiting to commemorate a loved one, and we can't because there's no room in that park. So we would then, the application process would then suggest another location for them, and then it's up to them whether they take it or not. But there are parks that are very, very popular. So Miller Point, for example, there's a bench every few hundred feet, if that's the right words. So if we had a minimum donation as part of the application, what's the comfort level there, and where would that amount be? Because then we don't have a ceiling. We can, if someone wants to give us $10,000, they can, and they get, you're going to give us a tax receipt anyway. But for someone to have a plaque on a sole piece of furniture for 10 years, where do we see that as a cost?
This might be a question for Trudy or Elena. Is there a certain level that has to be donated before we give a tax receipt? Okay, I'm seeing no. I thought that
I think it's $100 on the designated communities. We say it's $100, but that's in that policy.
Okay.
Yeah, the challenge that we're having and what spurred us to bring this policy discussion is we're getting a higher increase of ask from folks. And as Sandra had pointed out, in the day when there was a wooden bench or wood, it was easier. It wasn't as cost prohibitive. But we also didn't have any guidelines, so people have an expectation that they're in perpetuity. So when one of those benches rots and we have to remove it, we have had a couple of angry people call us to say, where's our bench? We gave you our $250. So it's the balance that we're trying to strike around what is fair, what's affordable, and what can we accommodate in the park. We have been turning people away because we don't have this policy. And when it was 1 or 2 that was happening in 10 years, it seemed like we could do the ad hoc, but it has really increased, and people really want to have that level of commemoration on the bench solely for their loved one. But now that we have standards around what kind of furnishing we want, there are some limitations. And so this is the dilemma around this particular policy, because people are, I hear what the mayor's saying about a donation, but I think people want to give that donation knowing that they have some kind of recognition in that park. And maybe it's not a bench, maybe it's not a picnic table, maybe it is something like Councillor Bell has raised around the commemorative board or something. But that's the challenge and that's the dilemma. We certainly have some people that can afford the $7,000 that can only afford the $250. And how do you balance that out when the asset cost $7,000?
Certainly, Your Worship, just further to the donation part of it and the amount of a donation. So council has policies on certain types of donations, your designated community fund, pro kids, pro fund. But the municipality is essentially deemed a registered charity and can issue donation receipts for any amount of money. It's just that if we don't have a policy on what to do with it, it would just go into general revenues.
That makes sense. Councillor Oikel, then Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I'm really in agreement with a plaque board, because $250, even for a wooden bench, seems like really low. Yeah, so, but that a person who wants to put a plaque on that board not only covers the cost of the plaque, right, but just of installing it, you know, right, the whole, and that it is a certain amount, rather than just whatever, you know. And if they want a picnic table, then they pay for the picnic table, or the bench, right, rather than
full cost recovery.
Yes, yeah, if that's what they want. But if they just want their family recognized because their family goes to that park regularly or whatever, that putting a plaque on the board with no ceiling amount, right? They could say, well, we don't really want a picnic table, but we'll give you $2,000, right? But they still have their name on that board, and because they've paid for it.
Councillor Burns.
I just wanted to reiterate, I think it is, while probably the most uncomfortable option, because it's where economics meets humanity in people's financial situations and the imprint they've left on life and what they've enjoyed here, our responsibility is to the community as a whole and how they fund the organization, not to individuals who had a particular connection to the park, although my heart deeply goes out to them on that. So I think the floor for getting an asset into a park is the cost recovery, and I would argue it's the true cost recovery of that item, and that if it's there at a certain level, what we're seeing in the package, and that's what it costs for 10 years, then the expectation is also that you have that for 10 years, not in perpetuity, because the lifetime cost of that bench over a couple hundred years is a lot more than what the donation is. And we see this all the time in organizations where people leave commemorative stuff. It's more often done, and I think in other fundraising capacities, and I'm nervous to use that term because that's not what we're trying to do here, but there are tiers, like that is a reality of this. And so if someone's closing out an estate and the estate wants to make a donation and to be commemorative, there likely is the funds in that estate to deal with the bench. I can tell you from dealing with estates and trying to get away from them that the funds are there. So I think that's an easy thing, and then from there it's about creating a mechanism in which people who want to contribute less but don't need the bench can still find a way to do that. And whether it's a fund, whether it's a plaque or whatever, I think it's probably not, I'm not the expert in that, but it's about having that range. But the floor for assets is the cost of that asset, and I think according to the timeline that we expect that asset to live.
Councillor Smith.
I already passed once, and now I'm thinking of passing again because it is a very complicated topic. I will just say I lean in favor of having a fund that people can put different amounts into. I think, you know, when you think of who is recognized in communities, who's remembered in communities, we don't want it to just be the names of people who could afford it. And so I really favor a fund that people could put any amount into, but having strong communications around how much do how much does the bench really cost? How much does the picnic table really cost? So that people who can afford it are thinking, oh, okay, if, this is what it's costing the municipality, so this is what the neighborhood of what it would make to donate if I can afford that or more. But just to clarify, we have a plan for putting infrastructure in parks. So we're not adding to that when new requests come forward. Like, for example, I look at Indian Falls right now. Beautiful job. I hope everybody gets to check it out really soon. But there's not a lot of space in there for new benches or picnic tables. Much, I could, I could suggest a few things. But, like, we have a plan, and we're not, like, willy-nilly putting benches everywhere. So everything kind of has to be paced at a certain, these projects are not going to happen according to what's donated or who's asking.
So as Sandra has said, yeah, we would assess whether the park could handle another bench or a picnic table, or whether we had plans. And if we would come and say no, like at Miller Point, we're pretty much at our maximum. Can some parks accommodate others? For sure, especially when you're looking at accessibility standards and how many feet from a rest spot, there's probably some improvements that we can do. So we would look at that at each park and make a decision around whether we could accommodate or not. And if we couldn't, we would simply say no. But here are the parks that we would love to have additional park furnishings, but it's not in the budget at this moment in time.
Councillor Brooks.
I think I would echo a lot of what Councillor Smith has said. I think a fund that allows people at any price point to be involved is good. What I can't support, and what I've seen in other communities at times, is look at my bench that I could afford to put in here, and look at what I could afford. And if it's a public show of wealth, Nova Scotia does not need one more class division in our public spaces, so I will not support that. If there are assets that people want to get behind, that's great. I like the idea of a general fund so that people can feel part of that if they want to support throughout the parks. I'm glad to hear that, the evaluation will be based on our needs and not on wants. So that's really important to me. But this has to work for the community, and it has to not feel like people going in and just seeing other people's display of wealth. I can't support that.
Councillor Reinhardt.
Yeah, I really like the idea of a general fund. I can see why people, when they are donating, I can see why they would want a specific thing, like that's much more tangible to think about. But like in the case of Miller Point, we may not need any more benches, but we may be able to put that money towards something beneficial for the park. So if we could have a fund that isn't just about specific items, but more for the benefit of the park as a whole, I think that would be helpful. I don't exactly know how you would figure out how to commemorate and honor all the donations, but I'm sure there's a solution somewhere to that. But yeah, having the flexibility to do more than, say, a bench or a picnic table. Well, those might be needed at some parks. They might not be needed at others. So I think the fund is a good idea.
I think what I'm hearing for the most part, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not necessarily about commemorating a bench or a picnic table. We remove that completely from the policy and just make a commemorative, and that we would create some kind of plaque or wall that people could put in memory of. It could be in one location when you enter the particular parks, and then we'd set that I guess maybe not set a price, but make it reasonable for people to contribute, so it would be affordable. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Or am I hearing incorrectly?
I'm seeing nods and some more hands go up, so we'll take a few more speakers. Councillor Oikle, then Councillor Moore.
I think you're hearing two things. The plaque that they actually pay for, this is what I'm paying for, and then a fund where I don't need a plaque, but I want to donate $50. I want to donate $1,000, but we don't need a plaque. We want, I think it's more, to me, I think we're saying two things. Could be wrong.
Councillor Moore.
I don't know if anybody in this room has ever been to the New Germany Medical Center, but there is one wall when you walk in that has the $1,000 plaques from people, and this was all done when the medical center was being built by the community. And it was a fundraiser to get the money to build the medical center. And the other wall is all bricks, and then there's another wall that's all bricks. It's in memory of people and all that. That money was raised to build the medical center. But also now, when people do pass away, they are making donations to the medical center, and that goes right into the upkeep, and maybe it's listed in their minutes in their meetings or something like that, who donated and who doesn't. I mean, no, who donates, not who doesn't. And I think a fund is a good idea, and then it goes right back into the park itself, and recognition can be, if we don't want to do a commentative board or anything like that, we could always put these donations and list them in our municipal matters or do something. So anyway, just my thought.
Councillor Bell.
I was wondering if somewhere within our website we could have a series of professionally done pictures of our various parks, and then maybe overset on those pictures, maybe something like investments in our parks were made as a donation by the following individuals, and list the names of people. To me, that's a cost-effective way of getting the word out there. And if you don't necessarily make a difference in a name that appears that gave $100 or a name that gave $1,000, you don't create a class list. Everyone's contribution is appreciated, and it most likely had gone to the park where the picture appears behind, but it didn't necessarily have to. But it's a way to recognize people. It doesn't involve a big cost to us, but the list can always be added on to for as long as we want to have the names there. Just a consideration.
Councillor Hubley.
I'm just kind of listening to everything around the table. I like the idea of the general fund. The donor does need to be recognized, but I think that these commemorative boards in every park could really become huge. I don't think we can do that. I don't think, logically speaking, we can put every donation on a board. Yeah, and I don't have an answer.
There are some clever things out there that we've seen in other, there was a tree, a metal tree, that's installed in a memorial garden or something, and you buy leaves, and the name is engraved on the leaf, and the leaf is hung. So these trees kind of grow, if you like, over time. So theoretically, yes, a board you'd need to constantly maintain that board, and a tree maybe is something we looked at for something else. So that when you said that, that's where my head has gone. But yeah, but it's a metal tree that would age over time, and then you hang the leaves on with the name on. But I don't remember how much it is.
I don't have any other speakers on the list. Do you feel like you've garnered some headway? Well,
We'll go and discuss it, and you'll let us know when we come back.
okay. That sounds good. Well, it's policy development, and it's going to take a couple times to get it right. And even when we think we get it right, we come back to it and make amendments. So we have to start somewheres, and what I've heard, now's the time to start, so.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick 10-minute recess, and we'll return with our mayors, deputy mayors, councilor matters after that. All right, continuing along in our agenda, item 10.1, under Mayor's, Deputy Mayor's Council Matters. We have two updates from Councillor Smith. The first one is the South Shore Regional Public Library update, and then the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Society update.
Okay, just two quick updates. I haven't updated for a while on these committees, and they both have AGMs coming up next week on the 24th. Yeah, I'll mention that in each of these reports. Just really quickly, on both of these, financial concerns continue to be a thread. With libraries, definitely the regional funding for regional libraries is a big topic in the public right now, with the closures of branches in Annapolis coming. And I just want to put it on the record that, again, if anybody's listening, you know, our municipal mayors in our region sent a letter on April 30th, 2025, outlining the unsustainability of funding in our own region. And part of the reason I mention that is because response to what's happening in Annapolis from the province has been kind of like, how did this happen? We keep telling them how it's happening, and we're still in the same position regionally as a library. The funding model is unsustainable. The funding formula itself really needs to be updated. It doesn't take into account our current population or inflation over the last number of years. So we're really struggling to stretch that budget, and you may have seen in the news last week, Ashley Nunn-Smith gave an interview with CBC, and she said, we're gonna be where Annapolis is in 1 to 2 years. So it's really important for me to put that on the record when I can, because it is coming if the province doesn't update the funding formula. We, as a board, we're working really hard to be as strong as we can. So we've reinitiated a communications committee so that we're communicating as strongly as we can about libraries. We've also reinitiated fundraising and governance committees, just to really do all that we can. You may have seen that Zoe Valley Memorial Library reopened last week or 2 weeks ago, and I really encourage everyone to check it out. It's a very cool library location in Chester. It used to be a community library, but now the Village of Chester has taken over managing it, and they are partnering with South Shore Public Libraries, much in the same way we are with the Community Hub. So the Village of Chester, along with the Zoe Valley Memorial Endowment Fund, pays for everything. Capital, which municipalities usually pay for, but also operations, which usually goes through the operating grant from the province that we contribute to as well. And I also mentioned the Rachel Reed fundraiser that people are very excited about, and just an example of how we're trying to raise as much as we can as a board and as a library region. So our AGM is this month, and you know, just as long as our audit is complete, that's going ahead on the evening of June 24th at the Bridgewater Library. It's open to the public. Please come, and there'll be a few long service awards. And Tom Shepard, who's been on the board for 29 years, is retiring that night. So there'll also be special recognition of him. And senior safety, I just wanted to put the report in the package, so that's there for your information. We, as a society, we continue to work on sustainability as the need for senior safety coordinator services far outstrips our capacity with just one coordinator. We're still looking at how do we add another coordinator, and that will be the focus of next year's work. Some interesting conversation around layered policing has been happening, and I'm sure we'll hear about that more over time. And we're looking at having someone help us develop a fund development strategy. If there's anyone you know who would like to get involved with our society, who has expertise in fundraising or fund development, we'd be really happy to welcome them on board. And that AGM is happening on June 24th at 1:30 p.m. at the Bridgewater Police Community Room. And again, everyone's welcome. Come and meet members of the society, counselors and community members, and learn more about the organization. Thank you.
Is there any questions for Councillor Smith on either update? Okay, seeing none, we'll go down to the FCM update. And just a little background, FCM stands for Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and they hold a conference every year in one city across Canada. Councillors divide up over the course of 4 years to send one person every year. Unless it's locally, then there might be an opportunity for more to attend. And this update is on here today to allow those that attended the conference in Edmonton last month, or was the beginning of this month? It was June, this month, an update if they wish. And those who attended in Edmonton was the mayor, Councillor Burns, Bell, Hubley, and more. So I'll turn it over to Mayor McLean-Weil first, and if other people want to share anything from the conference, the floor will be open to them as well.
Well, I took the time on the flight home, which is a good time to do some writing. So I did prepare and did distribute a report to council members on the FCM conference. I would say that the biggest discussions are around infrastructure, the role of municipalities in actually delivering the big ideas that the federal government talks about and is investing in around building infrastructure and big projects, that ends up being delivered by municipalities. So there was a lot of reconfirmation by all the FCM speakers that were elected officials that we are the ones on the ground. We do deliver, actually implement and deliver those programs. So that municipalities need to be part of the planning process. My report I have sent around, so that's all really I want to comment on.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I sent my report around also. There was one thing that I forgot to mention, and it was at the trade show, and it was a company that goes in and sets up transit. They go in, they set it up, they run it, they buy the buses, and I thought, I should bring Elspeth over here to this booth, and but we never got to connect to do that, and I'm sure it's very costly, and very costly for a rural area. I'm sure they're more city oriented, but it was very interesting. And the trade show I found very good. I found them very friendly. There was booths that they wanted you to do some games and stuff that, and then, get like a little prize or something. So I actually found out, which I didn't know, that Martin and Edgar can fold socks very, very well. Thank you.
Councillor Hubley.
So I don't really have a whole lot to add. I also prepared and distributed a report, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Councillor Burns.
I was going to give my report orally here rather than distribute another written report. I will talk quickly. I thought it was a great opportunity to meet with folks across the country, and what I found comforting was with municipalities that I would say are within a stretch of our size, that most of them face a lot of the same challenges and opportunities that we do. So I found that comforting to know that we're not alone. I also thought it was, ironically, a great chance to better understand local folks here, both on our own council, a lot of great conversations, as well as some of our regional folks, as well as our provincial folks. It was quite funny to know we went all the way to Edmonton to have a better conversation with our neighbors, but it was true. There were several wonderful sessions that we were able to attend. One, immigration, on how changes are affecting municipalities, and that session was delivered from a very human-centric approach. Was really informative to hear. There was a number of speakers, mainly a lot of political folks, giving us what's happening on the provincial and federal levels, but of particular, I thought relevance to us was the conversation starter, is how I viewed the conversation with Zita Cobb. And fundamentally, the question she's asking is, what is an economy? Who is it for? What is it for? And then used Fogo Islands as an example of having a place and having an economy that works for place rather than a place that works for economy. So it was a very, what I thought, a thought-provoking conversation as well. You know, at the risk of running afoul of Go Rock and Bridgewater, I did attend a session on AI, and I thought it was quite useful, actually. And in fact, the whole session was not about this is what you do with it, but here are the things it can do, here are the things it can't do, and if you were going to use it responsibly, how would you? And the theme that continuously arose was that it's not a replacement for people and their judgment and the things that people want to see in organizations like ours, but it is a how can you use it to make the people who are already serving the community, how is it we can get them to serve the community quicker, more efficiently, and deliver better service, and really focus on what they're good at, which is interacting with the residents. And then lastly, toward local recreation infrastructure. In fact, I thought what was especially useful was seeing some of the community-led initiatives where they were looking at parks and rec, and they were looking at how were people using it, how was it that the parks were trying to police the use, why isn't that reconciling, and then following up with the community-led, this is how we want to use our parks in creating infrastructure and creating policies and creating things that work for them. So community-led initiatives at parks were a wonderful thing, and wish we could have done more. A lot of opportunities at the conference, but they filled up fairly quickly. So I know a lot of that feedback has been given to Halifax, and I suspect at Halifax there'll be more opportunity for those of us who wanted to attend sessions, but they were full, that there'll just either be more sessions or larger rooms at the Halifax conference next year.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. My report I had filed to the municipal clerk. I thought it was going to be attached to the agenda. I'll make it available to all council members, and then where it goes from there is totally up to you. One of the minor complaints I have about the FCM was the inability to get into participation under some of their group conversations, because they were cut off at 200 or 300 people, and I think that they turned away 100 people. And unless you could run from one area to the next, you didn't necessarily get to the door first. So I would have liked to have been in some of the other classrooms to hear that. I really enjoy the fact that the networking that takes place, that is worth so much. When you can talk to somebody in a municipality in Ontario that's our size, or in Saskatchewan, and find out they have the same issues and problems that we do, but sometimes they're offering solutions, or did you try this, or so on. So I keep them in the back of my memory so that when we have discussions, I'll be able to bring that up. I took part in one study tour that looked at communities, new communities, building communities, and not necessarily the developer coming in and set their plans down on the table and say, this is what we're going to do. We have an opportunity in Wildville, Hebville, and Conquerall Bank where developers want to do development, and I hope that they will involve the community. Ask the community how they want to do it. Ask our development officer what options they have, and we as councillors be able to put input to that. One of the case studies that Councillor Moore and Councillor Hubley and myself went to is that when they develop a community, the first thing that they do is the central point is a park. The community is built around the park. It doesn't have to be a large park, but it's a common area where the kids can go play, the seniors can walk, or the middle-aged people can kick a soccer ball around. Some of them had paved sidewalks lined with trees. This is going to be a fantastic area in another 20 years. But the other thing that they did is these parks became the central part and the fronting of a house, so that your house didn't face the highway, it faced the park. So everyone can be on their veranda watching the neighbor's kids. And it's like a shared community, a shared responsibility, and people actually get to talk. If the houses was placed the other way around, you would have traffic noise, or you have to worry about people playing out where there is traffic. And you always see the illustrations of the kids in the neighborhood with the basketball court on the street. And really, that's what happens in a lot of suburban areas. This was promoting play, but away from the street. And so there's a lot of things that you can build into a community. Street lighting, instead of being on poles and creating a lot of, what's the name of it, where the light escapes, and they gave it to me, I forget it. But the lighting in the shared areas was on like 5-foot poles facing down. Light pollution. Why I couldn't think of that. So these are things that I would like to see incorporated in communities that we build in the future if we have a say. A lot of times the developer would think, well, I'm the one that's investing into the community, I'll build it the way I want. But I think that we can build better communities if we had the cooperation of the developer to have a discussion with those that might live there. One of the developers, they were building a house a week, building over 100 houses in a neighborhood in a year, or 300, and had already started with a farmer's field that is now got city status. And one of the questions I asked, I saw all these beautiful houses, and I asked them, did you take out any property to build a fire station? And they said, well, no, we didn't. It comes from the next town. I said, what does that do to your insurance rates? And he didn't really want to answer that question. And then he said, well, we have a delayed response. They pay an extra fee. I said, do you plan on building a fire station? He said, actually, we are now collecting an area rate, and we are going to build our own fire station and then donate it to the city. So what the developers saw as building a quick community, sometimes they leave out a very important component. So these are things that I wouldn't want to see the same mistakes made. So for me, that was very enlightening. Thank you.
Counselor Hubli.
I would just like clarified where we were supposed to send those updates. I had sent mine to Tina to be included in the minutes. So if we could get that information back to us, so we have them sent to the right person, so they are included. Do you want them? I'll forward it to you.
Any questions or comments from those that attended FCM? Counselor Smith.
Just a quick comment on AI, because it's been a big community conversation, and I really appreciate Councillor Burns bringing it up. It was a conversation at NSFM as well, and there was a presentation on harnessing AI, and people can see that presentation at the past conferences tab for spring 2026. And it did present some helpful things about thinking about AI, particularly shadow AI, in your organization in the context of Bill 150, which is around privacy concerns, around privacy. So I just wanted to add that because, you know, it's a big conversation. Everybody's talking about it, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it because it's here.
This concludes our regular agenda. We do have one in-camera item. So with that, can I get a motion to go in camera? Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Oikel. All those in favor? Opposed? We are now in camera. First, can I get a motion to come out of in camera? Moved by Mayor McLean-Weil, seconded by Councillor Reinhardt. All those in favor? Motion is approved unanimously. This concludes our Policy and Strategy Committee today for Tuesday, June 16th. I will now declare that we are adjourned.